My sister borrowed my designer clothes without asking. I discovered this while scrolling through her Instagram, seeing her posing in my limited edition Prada dress at a rooftop party in Manhattan. It was July, hot enough that my phone screen felt sticky against my fingertips as I zoomed in on the photo to make sure I wasn't imagining things. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I was sitting in my small apartment, surrounded by fashion design sketches, empty coffee cups, and the quiet hum of a fan that barely pushed the humid air around. The irony wasn't lost on me, while I worked double shifts to afford the designer pieces that filled my carefully curated closet. My sister Vanessa paraded them around at exclusive events I wasn't even invited to. It was my roommate Zoe who confirmed it when she walked in with grocery bags and glanced over my shoulder. "Isn't that your Prada? The one you saved 6 months for?" she asked, setting down a carton of oat milk. I nodded, unable to form words as I continued scrolling through Vanessa's feed. There it was, photo after photo. My Chanel purse at a gallery opening. My Louboutins at a charity gala. My vintage Dior jacket at a weekend in the Hamptons. I smiled tightly and put my phone down. "Looks like my sister's been shopping in my closet again," I said, trying to sound casual. Then I excused myself to go check my closet, which was code for sitting on the floor of my bedroom counting backward from 100 and trying to breathe through the burning sensation in my chest. Vanessa was my younger sister by 3 years. I had always been the responsible one, the one who followed the rules, who worked hard and saved up for the things she wanted. I put myself through fashion school while Vanessa dropped out of college to become a lifestyle influencer, somehow landing on her feet with sponsorships and partnerships that paid for her lavish Manhattan apartment while I shared a cramped 2-bedroom in Brooklyn. I was the one who helped her prepare for her first big interview at a fashion magazine, staying up all night to create a portfolio for her. I was the one who loaned her money when she absolutely needed to attend that networking event in Milan. I was the one who connected her with my industry contacts I had worked years to cultivate. And now she was wearing my clothes, the few luxuries I allowed myself after years of hard work, without even asking. I sat on my bedroom floor for what felt like hours, running my fingers along the empty hangers where my best pieces should have been. The realization hit me slowly, then all at once: this wasn't the first time. This was just the first time she'd been careless enough to post it on social media. I thought back to all the times my clothes seemed slightly out of place, how certain items smelled faintly of an unfamiliar perfume, how the hemline on my favorite skirt had mysteriously needed repair. Looking around my room, I saw the evidence of our different lives. My walls were covered with inspiration boards and design sketches. Fabric swatches and pattern paper littered every surface. A sewing machine sat in the corner, surrounded by spools of thread and half-finished projects. I had built my life piece by piece, stitch by stitch. And Vanessa? She had built hers on Instagram filters and borrowed glamour, some of it quite literally borrowed from me. I waited 3 days before I called her. It wasn't because I needed time to calm down. I wasn't angry exactly. I wasn't even looking for an apology. I think I just needed to hear her say it out loud, that she'd been taking the things I valued most without even asking. She picked up on the 4th ring. "Hey sis," she said breathlessly, the sound of music and voices in the background. "Can I call you back? I'm at this amazing rooftop party in Soho." "I just have a quick question," I said, keeping my voice light. "Are you wearing my clothes in your Instagram posts?" A pause. The muffling sound of her moving somewhere quieter. "What posts?" "The ones from the gallery opening. The charity gala. The weekend in the Hamptons." Another pause, longer this time. Then a laugh, high and nervous. "Oh, those? I meant to ask you, but it was always last minute, you know how these invitations are. I didn't think you'd mind." "I mind," I said simply. "Don't be so uptight, Emma." She sighed. "It's just clothes. We're sisters. We're supposed to share." That word again. Uptight. It was the same word she used when I expressed concern about her dropping out of college. The same one she used when I suggested she might be spending too much on her apartment. "Don't be so uptight, Emma. Live a little." I let the silence stretch between us, the background noise of her party filling the void. "You know," she continued, her voice softer now, placating, "people always ask me where I get my outfits. I've been tagging the designers. It's good exposure. For you too, as an aspiring designer." Aspiring? As if I hadn't been working in the industry for years. As if my designs weren't being considered by boutiques in Brooklyn. As if the only value my clothes had was how they looked on her Instagram feed. I need them back, I said finally. All of them. Tomorrow. Tomorrow? She sounded genuinely surprised. I can't do tomorrow. I have meetings all day, and then there's this launch party for tomorrow, Vanessa. Or I call mom and tell her. How you're affording all those designer outfits on your influencer salary. Our mother, a practical woman who believed in hard work and saving money, who had no idea that her younger daughter was living so far beyond her means, borrowing not just clothes but the appearance of success. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Fine, she huffed. I'll drop them off. But you're being ridiculous about this whole thing. I didn't slam my phone down. Or scream into a pillow after we hung up. I didn't post anything passive-aggressive online or text our mutual friends about what a nightmare my sister was. Instead, I sat at my sewing machine and finished the sample I had been working on for a small boutique in Williamsburg. Then I opened my laptop and looked at my bank account. 6 years of working in fashion, first as an intern, then as an assistant, now as a junior designer at a small label. 6 years of saving every extra dollar, of making my own clothes when I could, of hunting for sample sales and outlet deals when I couldn't. 6 years of building a portfolio, of networking at industry events, of pushing myself to be better. And what did I have to show for it? A closet half empty because my sister had borrowed my most prized possessions, a bank account that could barely cover next month's rent, and an Instagram feed with less than 1,000 followers compared to Vanessa's 60,000. I scrolled through her profile again, studying each photo carefully. The locations. The people tagged. The events. The lifestyle. In each image, she looked perfectly at ease, as if she belonged in those exclusive spaces, wearing those expensive clothes. My clothes. That's when I had the idea. If Vanessa could borrow my designer clothes without asking, maybe I could borrow something of hers too. Not her clothes or her accessories, those were just things. I wanted something more valuable. I wanted her access. Her invitations. Her life. The next morning, Vanessa texted that she'd leave my clothes with the doorman of her building. No apology, just a time, 3 p.m. I didn't respond. Instead, I called in sick to work, something I never did. I spent the morning going through my email archives, looking for something specific, an invitation Vanessa had forwarded me months ago, asking for my opinion on what she should wear. It was for an exclusive fashion industry event, the kind that required a personalized QR code for entry. I remembered thinking at the time how strange it was that she'd been invited when I, the one who actually worked in fashion, hadn't been. Found it. The invitation was for Atelier 2025, an annual showcase for emerging designers hosted by Vogue. Attendance was by invitation only, and the networking opportunities were legendary. Designers had launched entire careers from connections made at this event. And tucked into the email was Vanessa's personalized entry code, still valid for the event that was happening that very evening. I shouldn't have been invited to this event. Vanessa shouldn't have been invited either, she wasn't a designer, just someone who wore designers. But somehow, she had finagled an invitation through her growing social media presence, her carefully curated connections, her borrowed glamour. Well, tonight I would borrow some of that glamour back. At 3 p.m., I walked into the lobby of Vanessa's luxury apartment building. The doorman, a man in his 50s with kind eyes, smiled in recognition. "Ms. Emma, good to see you. Your sister left something for you." He handed me a large garment bag and 2 shopping bags, all monogrammed with my initials. At least she'd had the decency to return everything properly. "Thank you, Robert," I said, remembering his name from previous visits. "Actually, I'm supposed to meet Vanessa upstairs, but I forgot my key." He hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. "Of course, Ms. Emma. I'll let you up." The elevator ride to the 22nd floor was swift and silent. I knew what I was doing was wrong on some level, but it also felt like justice. A rebalancing of scales that had been tipped against me for too long. Vanessa's apartment was exactly as I remembered, minimalist, expensive, perfectly curated for Instagram backdrops. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Manhattan skyline, a view she'd shown off countless times in her posts. I set down the bags of my returned clothes and began to explore. Her closet was a designer showcase, clothes organized by color and season, many still with tags attached. Her makeup table was covered with high-end products, most sent to her for free by brands hoping for a mention in her stories. But I wasn't interested in her things. I went straight to her home office, a small room she'd converted into what she called her content creation studio. There, on a bulletin board above her desk, was what I was looking for. A calendar filled with events, parties, product launches, and networking opportunities. Next to it, a list of contacts, editors, photographers, brand ambassadors, PR representatives. And on her desk, a stack of invitations similar to the one I had found in my email. I took photos of everything, careful not to disturb anything. I wasn't stealing, I told myself. I was borrowing. Just like she had borrowed my clothes. The difference was, I would make better use of what I borrowed. On her desk was a sleek laptop. It was password protected, of course, but I knew Vanessa. She used the same password for everything, our childhood dog's name followed by her birth year. I typed it in, and the screen unlocked. Her email was full of opportunities. Invitations to exclusive events. Offers from brands for collaborations. Connections to people I had been trying to reach for years through proper professional channels. I forwarded the most promising ones to myself, then carefully deleted the forwarded emails from her sent folder. Before leaving, I noticed a small notebook on her nightstand. Inside were handwritten notes about her upcoming posts, ideas for content, and most interestingly, observations about the people she'd met. Which editor liked which designer? Which PR person could get you into which event? Which brand representatives were easy to persuade and which required more finesse? I took photos of these pages too, then carefully replaced the notebook exactly as I'd found it. As I left the apartment, I felt a strange mix of guilt and exhilaration. What I had done wasn't right, but neither was what Vanessa had done to me. We were now even, in a way. Both borrowing things that didn't belong to us. Back in my own apartment, I laid out my returned clothes on my bed. They seemed different somehow, as if they had absorbed some of Vanessa's confidence during their time with her. I selected the most appropriate outfit for tonight's event, a black dress I had designed and sewn myself, paired with the Louboutins Vanessa had just returned. The contrast wasn't lost on me, her borrowed event, my own design. I spent the next few hours preparing. I studied Vanessa's notes about the people who would be attending. I practiced introducing myself, not as Vanessa's sister or as a junior designer, but as someone who belonged in those rooms. I styled my hair the way Vanessa did for important events, sleek and sophisticated. I applied makeup carefully, highlighting my best features just as she did in her tutorials. By 7 p.m., I was ready. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked confident, successful, like someone who navigated exclusive fashion events with ease. Like someone who belonged in the world Vanessa had created for herself, a world built partly on my designs, my connections, my hard work. I took a photo of myself and posted it to my rarely used Instagram account. No caption, no location tag, no hint of where I was going. Just me, transformed, ready to step into a borrowed life. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with a notification. Vanessa had seen my post and texted, "Where are you going dressed like that?" I didn't respond. Let her wonder for once. The event was being held at a converted warehouse in Chelsea, the kind of industrial chic space that featured prominently in fashion magazines. A line of people waited outside, all dressed impeccably, all looking slightly anxious about whether they would actually make it past the velvet rope. I bypassed the line and went straight to the entrance, showing the QR code on my phone with a confidence I didn't entirely feel. The security guard scanned it, nodded, and stepped aside to let me in. Just like that, I was inside a world that had previously existed for me only through Vanessa's carefully filtered Instagram posts. The space was transformed into a showcase for emerging designers, with small installations featuring their work. Waiters circulated with champagne and tiny hors d'oeuvres. Beautiful people air-kissed and exchanged business cards. In one corner, a DJ played music just loud enough to create atmosphere but not so loud that it prevented conversation. I accepted a glass of champagne and began to move through the crowd, observing, listening. According to Vanessa's notes, the woman in the striking red pantsuit was an editor at Vogue. The man with the distinctive glasses was a buyer for a high-end department store. The tall woman by the bar was a famous stylist who worked with A-list celebrities. I took a deep breath and approached the editor, extending my hand. Emma Mitchell, I said, using my full name rather than the diminutive Vanessa always introduced me with. I love what you've done with the spring issue. She looked surprised but pleased. Thank you. Have we met before? Not officially. I smiled. But I'm a designer. Small label, focused on sustainable luxury. This wasn't entirely true. I worked for a small label, but I wasn't the head designer. Not yet. But tonight, in this borrowed life, I could be whoever I wanted. Interesting, she said, and to my surprise, she seemed genuinely interested. What's your approach to sustainability? And just like that, I was having a real conversation with a Vogue editor about design philosophy, about ethical sourcing, about the future of fashion. I spoke passionately about ideas I'd had for years but had never had the opportunity to share with someone who could actually help bring them to life. As we talked, I noticed others listening in, nodding appreciatively. When the conversation naturally came to an end, the editor handed me her card. Send me your lookbook, she said. I'd like to see more of your work. I moved through the event with growing confidence, introducing myself to key figures from Vanessa's notes, engaging in conversations about design and fashion, collecting business cards and making connections that would have taken me years to establish through conventional channels. At one point, I found myself talking to the buyer from the high-end department store. He was particularly interested in my description of a sustainable luxury collection. We're actually looking to expand our ethical fashion section, he said. Do you have samples I could see? I thought quickly. I'm working on the final pieces now. I could have them ready for viewing next week. Perfect, he said, handing me his card. Email me to set up an appointment. By the end of the evening, my small clutch was full of business cards, and my mind was racing with possibilities. I had presented myself as the designer I aspired to be, and people had believed me. More than that, they had been interested in what I had to say, in the designs I described, in the vision I shared. As I was leaving, my phone buzzed again. Multiple messages from Vanessa. Seriously, where are you? Are those my contacts you're talking to in your stories? Emma, what are you doing? I hadn't posted any stories. Someone must have tagged me in theirs. I checked Instagram and found that the Vogue editor had posted a photo of us in conversation, tagging me with a caption that read, "Discovering new talent is the best part of my job. Keep an eye on Emma Mitchell." Outside the venue, I hailed a taxi, giving the driver my Brooklyn address. As the city lights blurred past the window, I felt a strange sense of calm. What I had done tonight wasn't exactly honest, but it had opened doors that had been firmly closed to me despite years of hard work and talent. My phone buzzed again. Vanessa was calling now. I declined the call and turned off my phone. Whatever conversation we were going to have could wait until tomorrow. Tonight belonged to me. Back in my apartment, I kicked off the Louboutins and sat at my small desk. I opened my laptop and began to sketch frantically, ideas flowing from me with new urgency. If the buyer wanted to see samples next week, I would have to work around the clock to create them. But I had the skills. I had the vision. All I had needed was the opportunity, and now I had borrowed that too. Zoe knocked on my bedroom door around midnight, poking her head in with a curious expression. Where have you been? You look different. I smiled, not looking up from my sketches. I've been networking. Must have been some networking. Your phone's been blowing up. I think it's your sister. I nodded absently, still focused on my work. I'll call her tomorrow. Everything okay between you two? I paused, considering the question. Were things okay between Vanessa and me? No, they hadn't been for a long time. But maybe they would be, once we established new boundaries. Once we recognized what we had each taken from the other without asking. Everything's fine, I said finally. We're just figuring some things out. Zoe looked skeptical but nodded. Well, don't stay up all night. You look like you've had quite an evening. After she left, I turned my phone back on. 27 missed calls from Vanessa. 15 text messages, each more frantic than the last. And one email, sent just an hour ago. What the hell, Emma? That was MY invitation. Those are MY contacts. You had no right to go to that event pretending to be someone you're not. You've ruined everything. Margot from Vogue just emailed me asking about my talented sister the designer and saying she can't wait to see your lookbook. I've spent months cultivating that relationship. What am I supposed to tell her now? I read the email twice, letting the words sink in. Months cultivating relationships. Pretending to be someone you're not. The irony was almost too perfect. I began to type a response, then stopped. Instead, I opened my design software and started working on a digital lookbook. I had 1 week to create a collection worthy of the interest I had generated tonight. 1 week to transform the opportunity one had borrowed into something I had earned. As I worked through the night, I thought about Vanessa, about the relationship we had once had, about how it had twisted into something unrecognizable. I thought about the clothes she had borrowed, the access I had borrowed, the lives we had each tried on for size. By morning, I had the beginnings of a collection, sketches, fabric selections, a cohesive vision. I also had a decision to make. I could continue down this path, using the connections I had made under somewhat false pretenses to launch my career. Or I could come clean, apologize to Vanessa and to the people I had met, and find another way forward. I looked at my phone, still buzzing with messages from Vanessa. None of them contained an apology for taking my clothes without asking, for using my designs to enhance her image, for stepping over me on her climb up the social ladder. None of them acknowledged the years I had spent supporting her, connecting her, helping her build the very platform she was now accusing me of undermining. The sun was rising over Brooklyn, casting long shadows across my sketches. In a few hours, I would need to go to work, to return to my real life as a junior designer. With big dreams and limited opportunities. But something had shifted during the night. The woman who had walked into that event yesterday evening wasn't entirely fabricated. She was me, the me I could be if given the chance. I picked up my phone and typed a simple response to Vanessa's email. Now we're even. Let's talk about where we go from here. Then I sent a separate email to Margot, the Vogue editor, attaching preliminary sketches of my sustainable luxury collection and thanking her for her interest in my work. The path forward wasn't clear yet. I didn't know if the connections I had made would lead to real opportunities, if Vanessa would forgive me, if I could forgive her. But for the first time in years, I felt like we were on equal footing. Both of us borrowing, both of us building, both of us trying to become the women we aspired to be. As I finally lay down to sleep, my phone buzzed one last time. A new email from Margot. These sketches are exceptional. Let's meet next week to discuss featuring your work in our upcoming issue on emerging sustainable designers. I smiled as sleep overtook me. Sometimes, you have to borrow a life to realize the one you want to build for yourself. The week that followed was a blur of fabric swatches, late nights, and caffeine. I worked my regular job during the day, then came home and devoted every remaining hour to creating the collection I had promised. My tiny apartment transformed into a makeshift atelier, with patterns draped over furniture and fabric samples pinned to every available surface. Zoe watched me with a mixture of concern and admiration. "I've never seen you like this," she said one evening, bringing me a cup of tea as I hunched over my sewing machine. "Whatever lit this fire under you, I'm here for it." I smiled gratefully. But didn't explain. How could I tell her that I had essentially stolen my sister's identity for an evening? That I was now frantically trying to become the designer I had pretended to be? My phone continued to buzz with messages from Vanessa, but I responded only with brief updates. Working on my collection. Meeting with Margot on Thursday. Can't talk now. Let her wonder for a change, I thought. Let her experience what it felt like to be on the outside looking in. 3 days after the event, I received an unexpected email from James Chen, the department store buyer I had met. He was interested in seeing my sustainable luxury pieces and suggested meeting at his office the following week. Another opportunity. I hadn't earned, not in the traditional sense, anyway, but one I was determined to make the most of. The night before my meeting with Margot, my mother called. Her timing had always been impeccable in the worst possible way. "Emma, darling," she said, her voice carrying that familiar note of concern. "Vanessa is upset. She says you've been avoiding her calls. She says you went to some fashion event using her invitation?" I sighed, setting down the silk blouse I had been hand-stitching. "Did she also mention that she's been borrowing my designer clothes without asking? Wearing them to events she never invited me to? Posting them on Instagram as if they were hers?" A pause. "Well, you know how Vanessa is. She gets excited about things and forgets to ask. You've always been so good about sharing with her." Of course. In my mother's eyes, Vanessa was still the baby of the family, prone to impulsive decisions. That needed to be excused, while I was the responsible one expected to accommodate her whims. "I'm not going to argue about this," I said firmly. Vanessa and I need to work this out between ourselves. But I have a meeting with Vogue tomorrow, and I need to finish preparing. Vogue? My mother's tone shifted instantly from concern to interest. What kind of meeting? They're considering featuring my designs in an upcoming issue, I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. The sustainable luxury collection I've been working on. Oh, Emma. That's wonderful. Her enthusiasm was genuine, if belated. I always knew you were talented. Does Vanessa know? Maybe she could post about it on her Instagram. She has so many followers now. The suggestion, well-intentioned as it was, stung. Even my potential success was viewed through the lens of how Vanessa could benefit from it. I'd rather keep this private for now, I said carefully. Until things are more definite. After we hung up, I returned to my work with renewed determination. The collection was taking shape, 6 pieces that embodied my vision of sustainable luxury. A silk blouse dyed with natural indigo. A tailored jacket made from reclaimed wool. A dress constructed from vintage fabric I had found at a thrift store and transformed. Each piece told a story of renewal, of transformation, of finding beauty in the overlooked. My meeting with Margot exceeded all expectations. She examined each piece carefully, asking thoughtful questions about my process, my inspiration, my goals as a designer. These are remarkable, she said finally, looking up from a detailed embroidery I had done by hand. Especially considering how quickly you put them together. I smiled, hoping my nervousness didn't show. I work well under pressure. Clearly, she nodded. Here's what I'm thinking. We have a feature planned for our September issue on the future of sustainable fashion. I'd like to include your work alongside 2 other emerging designers. It would mean a professional photo shoot, an interview, and of course, exposure to our entire readership. I tried to maintain my composure, but inside I was screaming with joy. September was the most important issue of the year in fashion magazines. To be featured there, especially as a new designer, was beyond anything I had dared to hope for. That sounds perfect, I managed to say. Excellent. There's one other thing, Margot added, fixing me with a direct look. Your sister Vanessa. She's built quite a following as a fashion influencer. My heart sank. Of course. Even here, even now, Vanessa's shadow loomed over me. We think it could make for an interesting angle, Margot continued. Sisters on different sides of the industry, one creating fashion, one showcasing it. Would you be open to a joint feature? Perhaps even using her as a model for your designs? I hesitated, torn between my desire for the opportunity and my reluctance to share it with Vanessa. But wasn't this what I had wanted all along? Not to exclude her, but to stand beside her as an equal? I'll discuss it with her, I said finally. But yes, I think that could work. As I left Margot's office, clutching a contract for the feature, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Pride in my work being recognized. Anxiety about the deadline for completing the full collection. And uncertainty about how to approach Vanessa with this proposition. I decided to go to her apartment directly. This conversation needed to happen face to face. When Robert the doorman saw me, he smiled with recognition. Back again, Ms. Emma? Shall I let Ms. Vanessa know you're here? Yes, please, I nodded. No sneaking in this time. Vanessa met me at the door with arms crossed and lips pressed into a thin line. She looked simultaneously angry and hurt, her usual perfect appearance slightly disheveled. Well, look who finally decided to show up, she said, stepping aside to let me in. After stealing my invitation, impersonating a designer, and ignoring my calls for a week. I set my portfolio down on her pristine coffee table. I didn't impersonate a designer. I am a designer. And I didn't steal your invitation, I borrowed it. The same way you borrowed my clothes without asking. She flinched slightly at that. But held her ground. That's different. Is it? I opened my portfolio, revealing sketches and fabric samples. I met with Margot today. Vogue wants to feature my collection in the September issue. Vanessa's expression shifted, surprise. Temporarily overriding her anger. The September issue? That's amazing, Emma. You've ruined everything. Margot from Vogue just emailed me asking about my talented sister the designer and saying she can't wait to see your lookbook. I've spent months cultivating that relationship. What am I supposed to tell her now? I read the email twice, letting the words sink in. Months cultivating relationships. Pretending to be someone you're not. The irony was almost too perfect. I began to type a response, then stopped. Instead, I opened my design software and started working on a digital lookbook. I had 1 week to create a collection worthy of the interest I had generated tonight. 1 week to transform the opportunity one had borrowed into something I had earned. As I worked through the night, I thought about Vanessa, about the relationship we had once had, about how it had twisted into something unrecognizable. I thought about the clothes she had borrowed, the access I had borrowed, the lives we had each tried on for size. By morning, I had the beginnings of a collection, sketches, fabric selections, a cohesive vision. I also had a decision to make. I could continue down this path, using the connections I had made under somewhat false pretenses to launch my career. Or I could come clean, apologize to Vanessa and to the people I had met, and find another way forward. I looked at my phone, still buzzing with messages from Vanessa. None of them contained an apology for taking my clothes without asking, for using my designs to enhance her image, for stepping over me on her climb up the social ladder. None of them acknowledged the years I had spent supporting her, connecting her, helping her build the very platform she was now accusing me of undermining. The sun was rising over Brooklyn, casting long shadows across my sketches. In a few hours, I would need to go to work, to return to my real life as a junior designer. With big dreams and limited opportunities. But something had shifted during the night. The woman who had walked into that event yesterday evening wasn't entirely fabricated. She was me, the me I could be if given the chance. I picked up my phone and typed a simple response to Vanessa's email. Now we're even. Let's talk about where we go from here. Then I sent a separate email to Margot, the Vogue editor, attaching preliminary sketches of my sustainable luxury collection and thanking her for her interest in my work. The path forward wasn't clear yet. I didn't know if the connections I had made would lead to real opportunities, if Vanessa would forgive me, if I could forgive her. But for the first time in years, I felt like we were on equal footing. Both of us borrowing, both of us building, both of us trying to become the women we aspired to be. As I finally lay down to sleep, my phone buzzed one last time. A new email from Margot. These sketches are exceptional. Let's meet next week to discuss featuring your work in our upcoming issue on emerging sustainable designers. I smiled as sleep overtook me. Sometimes, you have to borrow a life to realize the one you want to build for yourself. The week that followed was a blur of fabric swatches, late nights, and caffeine. I worked my regular job during the day, then came home and devoted every remaining hour to creating the collection I had promised. My tiny apartment transformed into a makeshift atelier, with patterns draped over furniture and fabric samples pinned to every available surface. Zoe watched me with a mixture of concern and admiration. "I've never seen you like this," she said one evening, bringing me a cup of tea as I hunched over my sewing machine. "Whatever lit this fire under you, I'm here for it." I smiled gratefully. But didn't explain. How could I tell her that I had essentially stolen my sister's identity for an evening? That I was now frantically trying to become the designer I had pretended to be? My phone continued to buzz with messages from Vanessa, but I responded only with brief updates. Working on my collection. Meeting with Margot on Thursday. Can't talk now. Let her wonder for a change, I thought. Let her experience what it felt like to be on the outside looking in. 3 days after the event, I received an unexpected email from James Chen, the department store buyer I had met. He was interested in seeing my sustainable luxury pieces and suggested meeting at his office the following week. Another opportunity. I hadn't earned, not in the traditional sense, anyway, but one I was determined to make the most of. The night before my meeting with Margot, my mother called. Her timing had always been impeccable in the worst possible way. "Emma, darling," she said, her voice carrying that familiar note of concern. "Vanessa is upset. She says you've been avoiding her calls. She says you went to some fashion event using her invitation?" I sighed, setting down the silk blouse I had been hand-stitching. "Did she also mention that she's been borrowing my designer clothes without asking? Wearing them to events she never invited me to? Posting them on Instagram as if they were hers?" A pause. "Well, you know how Vanessa is. She gets excited about things and forgets to ask. You've always been so good about sharing with her." Of course. In my mother's eyes, Vanessa was still the baby of the family, prone to impulsive decisions. That needed to be excused, while I was the responsible one expected to accommodate her whims. "I'm not going to argue about this," I said firmly. "Vanessa and I need to work this out between ourselves. But I have a meeting with Vogue tomorrow, and I need to finish preparing." "Vogue? My mother's tone shifted instantly from concern to interest. What kind of meeting? They're considering featuring my designs in an upcoming issue, I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. The sustainable luxury collection I've been working on. Oh, Emma. That's wonderful. Her enthusiasm was genuine, if belated. I always knew you were talented. Does Vanessa know? Maybe she could post about it on her Instagram. She has so many followers now. The suggestion, well-intentioned as it was, stung. Even my potential success was viewed through the lens of how Vanessa could benefit from it. I'd rather keep this private for now, I said carefully. Until things are more definite. After we hung up, I returned to my work with renewed determination. The collection was taking shape, 6 pieces that embodied my vision of sustainable luxury. A silk blouse dyed with natural indigo. A tailored jacket made from reclaimed wool. A dress constructed from vintage fabric I had found at a thrift store and transformed. Each piece told a story of renewal, of transformation, of finding beauty in the overlooked. My meeting with Margot exceeded all expectations. She examined each piece carefully, asking thoughtful questions about my process, my inspiration, my goals as a designer. These are remarkable, she said finally, looking up from a detailed embroidery I had done by hand. Especially considering how quickly you put them together. I smiled, hoping my nervousness didn't show. I work well under pressure. Clearly, she nodded. Here's what I'm thinking. We have a feature planned for our September issue on the future of sustainable fashion. I'd like to include your work alongside 2 other emerging designers. It would mean a professional photo shoot, an interview, and of course, exposure to our entire readership. I tried to maintain my composure, but inside I was screaming with joy. September was the most important issue of the year in fashion magazines. To be featured there, especially as a new designer, was beyond anything I had dared to hope for. That sounds perfect, I managed to say. Excellent. There's one other thing, Margot added, fixing me with a direct look. Your sister Vanessa. She's built quite a following as a fashion influencer. My heart sank. Of course. Even here, even now, Vanessa's shadow loomed over me. We think it could make for an interesting angle, Margot continued. Sisters on different sides of the industry, one creating fashion, one showcasing it. Would you be open to a joint feature? Perhaps even using her as a model for your designs? I hesitated, torn between my desire for the opportunity and my reluctance to share it with Vanessa. But wasn't this what I had wanted all along? Not to exclude her, but to stand beside her as an equal? I'll discuss it with her, I said finally. But yes, I think that could work. As I left Margot's office, clutching a contract for the feature, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Pride in my work being recognized. Anxiety about the deadline for completing the full collection. And uncertainty about how to approach Vanessa with this proposition. I decided to go to her apartment directly. This conversation needed to happen face to face. When Robert the doorman saw me, he smiled with recognition. Back again, Ms. Emma? Shall I let Ms. Vanessa know you're here? Yes, please, I nodded. No sneaking in this time. Vanessa met me at the door with arms crossed and lips pressed into a thin line. She looked simultaneously angry and hurt, her usual perfect appearance slightly disheveled. Well, look who finally decided to show up, she said, stepping aside to let me in. After stealing my invitation, impersonating a designer, and ignoring my calls for a week. I set my portfolio down on her pristine coffee table. I didn't impersonate a designer. I am a designer. And I didn't steal your invitation, I borrowed it. The same way you borrowed my clothes without asking. She flinched slightly at that. But held her ground. That's different. Is it? I opened my portfolio, revealing sketches and fabric samples. I met with Margot today. Vogue wants to feature my collection in the September issue. Vanessa's expression shifted, surprise. Temporarily overriding her anger. The Mitchell sisters, designer and influencer. They want you to model some of my pieces. She sat down abruptly on her white leather sofa. Are you serious? Completely. I sat across from her, keeping my voice level. But before I agree to that, we need to talk about what happened. About the clothes. About the event. About everything. For a long moment, Vanessa was silent, her eyes moving from my face to the portfolio and back again. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, a short, surprised sound. You know what's funny? I always thought you were the one who had it all figured out. The responsible one. The talented one. The one who knew exactly what she wanted and worked steadily toward it. Me? It was my turn to be surprised. You're the one with 60,000 followers and brand deals and invitations to exclusive events. And no real skills, she said quietly. No talent of my own. Just a carefully curated image and the ability to look good in other people's clothes. Your clothes. The admission hung in the air between us, unexpected and fragile. I started. Borrowing your clothes because I admired your taste, she continued. Then it became, I don't know, a way to feel closer to you? You were always working, always focused on your designs. I felt like I was losing you to your ambition. I was working so hard because I needed to, I said. Not all of us can build a career on Instagram. You think this is easy? She gestured around her expensive apartment. Do you know how exhausting it is to maintain this image? To constantly worry that one wrong post, one unflattering photo, one fashion misstep could bring it all crashing down? I have no security, Emma. Just the constant pressure to be perfect. I hadn't thought about it that way. In my mind, Vanessa had always been the lucky one, the one who had found an easy path to success while I struggled. But perhaps her path had its own challenges, its own insecurities. I shouldn't have taken your clothes without asking, she admitted. And I shouldn't have kept you away from the industry events. I was afraid. Afraid of what? That you'd outshine me. That people would see your talent and realize I was just smoke and mirrors. The honesty in her voice was disarming. For the first time in years, I felt like I was seeing the real Vanessa, not the carefully constructed persona she presented to the world. I shouldn't have used your invitation without asking, I conceded. But I'm not sorry I went to that event. It changed everything for me. She nodded slowly. So what now? We do this Vogue feature together? On one condition, I said. From now on, we're honest with each other. No more borrowing without asking, not clothes, not invitations, not opportunities. We support each other as equals. Vanessa extended her hand, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. Deal? Over the next month, Vanessa and I worked closely together to prepare for the Vogue feature. I finished the collection, working nights and weekends while still maintaining my day job. Vanessa used her platform to create buzz about the upcoming feature, teasing glimpses of my designs without revealing too much. Our collaboration wasn't always smooth. We had different approaches, different priorities. I was focused on the integrity of the designs, while Vanessa was concerned with how they would photograph, how they would be received by her followers. But we found a balance, each bringing our strengths to the project. The photo shoot took place in a sunlit studio in Manhattan. Vanessa was a natural in front of the camera, bringing my designs to life with an ease I hadn't expected. As I watched her pose in a dress I had created from reclaimed silk, I felt a surprising surge of pride, not just in my work, but in her. You look beautiful, I told her during a break, adjusting the drape of the fabric on her shoulder. She smiled, a genuine smile without the practiced perfection of her Instagram posts. It's easy when the clothes are this good. You're really talented, Em. I've always known that. The interview that followed the photo shoot was eye-opening for both of us. The journalist was interested in our relationship as sisters, in how we navigated the fashion industry from our different positions within it. People think of fashion as just clothes, I explained, but it's really about identity. About how we present ourselves to the world. About the stories we tell through what we wear. Emma has always understood that, Vanessa added. I'm just learning it now. For me, fashion was about fitting in, about being accepted. For her, it's about authentic expression. The journalist looked between us with interest. And what about this collaboration? How did that come about? Vanessa and I exchanged glances. How much of the truth should we tell? Let's just say we both borrowed something from each other, Vanessa said finally. I borrowed her designs, she borrowed my platform. And we both ended up stronger for it. The September issue of Vogue was released on a rainy Tuesday in August. Zoe came home with a copy, her eyes wide with excitement. It's really happening, she said, placing the glossy magazine on our kitchen table. You're in Vogue, Emma. Actual Vogue. Together, we turned to the feature. There it was, 6 pages. Dedicated to my sustainable luxury collection, with Vanessa modeling each piece. The photographs were stunning, capturing both the intricate details of my designs and Vanessa's ability to showcase them. The accompanying article told the story of two sisters finding their unique paths in the fashion industry, then coming together. To create something neither could have accomplished alone. The Mitchell sisters represent two sides of modern fashion, the article concluded. Creation and curation, substance and style, craft and communication. Together, they offer a compelling vision for the future of an industry in transformation. My phone began to ring almost immediately after the issue hit newsstands. First James Chen, confirming his interest in carrying my collection in his department store. Then a boutique owner in Soho. Then a sustainable fashion collective in Paris. Opportunities one had once only dreamed of were suddenly within reach. Vanessa's follower count skyrocketed as well, with her posts about the collection and the feature generating unprecedented engagement. Brands that had previously overlooked her now sought her out, impressed by her connection to sustainable luxury fashion. 2 weeks after the issue was released, Vanessa invited me to dinner at an exclusive restaurant in the meatpacking district. When I arrived, she was already seated at a corner table, looking elegant in one of my designs, this time, with my explicit permission. To the Mitchell sisters, she said, raising her glass as I sat down. Fashion's new power duo. I smiled, clinking my glass against hers. Is that what they're calling us? It's what I'm calling us, she grinned. And I have a proposal to make it official. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a business plan for Mitchell & Mitchell, a new fashion brand combining my design skills and her marketing expertise. A true collaboration, with equal ownership and clearly defined roles. You design, I promote, she explained. Together, we build something neither of us could create alone. What do you think? I studied the proposal, impressed by the level of detail, the thoughtfulness of the structure. This wasn't a hasty idea but something Vanessa had put serious consideration into. I think, I said slowly, that this could be the beginning of something extraordinary. As we discussed the details of our potential partnership, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us to this point. From resentment to reconciliation. From borrowing without permission to deliberate collaboration. We had each envied what the other possessed, failing to recognize our own unique strengths. You know, Vanessa said, as if reading my thoughts, I used to think success was about having the right clothes, being seen at the right events, knowing the right people. But watching you this past month, your dedication to your craft, your vision, your integrity, I've realized it's about something much deeper. And what's that? I asked. Authenticity, she said simply. Being true to who you are and what you believe in. You taught me that, Em. I smiled, thinking of how far we had both come. And you taught me that it's not enough to create in isolation. That sharing your work, connecting with others, building a platform, that matters too. We stayed at that restaurant until closing, planning our future, healing our past. Two sisters who had once borrowed pieces of each other's lives now deliberately choosing to share them. The following morning, I gave notice at my day job. It was time to take a leap of faith, to fully commit to the path that had opened before me. As I packed up my desk, my boss stopped by, a copy of Vogue in her hands. I always knew you were destined for bigger things, she said, her expression a mixture of pride and regret. Promise you'll remember us when you're famous. I laughed, but the moment struck me with its significance. 6 weeks ago, I had been a junior designer with limited prospects, watching from the sidelines as my sister lived what I thought was the dream life. Now I was leaving to start my own label, in partnership with that same sister, featured in Vogue and courted by retailers. All because I had decided to borrow a life for one evening. That night, I posted on Instagram for the first time in weeks. It wasn't a perfectly styled photo or a carefully curated image. Comments poured in from fashion industry insiders, from Vanessa's followers, from friends and family. But the one that meant the most came from our mother, so proud of both my girls. Always knew you were stronger together. As I prepared for bed that night, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Thank you for borrowing my life that night. It helped me see what was missing from it. Reality. Purpose. You. I smiled, typing back, and thank you for borrowing my clothes. It helped me find my voice. And my sister. The next morning, I woke early and sat by my window, watching the sunrise over Brooklyn. The light painted the buildings in shades of gold and amber, transforming the ordinary into something beautiful. It reminded me of what I loved most about design, the ability to see potential where others saw nothing special, to create beauty from what had been discarded or overlooked. On my desk lay sketches for the first official Mitchell & Mitchell collection. Beside them, a framed copy of our Vogue feature. And pinned to my inspiration board, a simple note I had written to myself the night after the atelier event: sometimes you have to borrow a life to find your own. My phone buzzed with a message from Margot at Vogue. The response to your feature has been extraordinary. We'd like to follow up with a piece on the launch of Mitchell & Mitchell. When can we talk? Another buzz, this time from James Chen. Buyers from our Paris and Tokyo locations are interested in your collection. Can you meet next week to discuss international distribution? And finally, a message from Vanessa, studio space viewing. At 10. Bring coffee. The expensive kind. We're not struggling designers anymore. Sparkles, I laughed, setting my phone down to get ready. She was right, we weren't struggling anymore. But we were authentic in a way we hadn't been before. I had borrowed Vanessa's access, her connections, her confidence. She had borrowed my designs, my skills, my perspective. And in the exchange, we had each found something more valuable than what we had taken, ourselves, and each other. As I left my apartment that morning, heading to meet my sister and begin our shared venture, I felt a sense of lightness I hadn't experienced in years. The resentment that had weighed me down, the envy that had clouded my vision, the insecurity that had limited my ambitions, all transformed, like reclaimed fabric in skilled hands, into something new and beautiful. I had borrowed my sister's designer life for one night. But the life I was stepping into now was entirely my own. Designed by me, for me, with purpose and intention. And the most beautiful part? I didn't have to face it alone. The launch of Mitchell & Mitchell exceeded all our expectations. 6 months after our Vogue feature, we had secured distribution in 3 major department stores, opened a small boutique in Soho, and amassed a waiting list for our limited edition pieces that stretched into the hundreds. Vanessa's strategic use of social media, combined with my design vision, had created something neither of us could have accomplished alone. Our studio space in the garment district hummed with activity: 2 full-time seamstresses, a pattern maker, and an administrative assistant who fielded the constant calls from retailers, press, and potential clients. The concrete floors were covered in fabric swatches, the walls plastered with inspiration boards and production schedules. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. I stood by the large industrial windows, coffee in hand, watching Vanessa direct a photo shoot for our summer collection. She moved with confidence, adjusting the model's pose, checking the lighting, ensuring every detail was perfect. "Let's try one with the jacket draped over her shoulders," she called to the photographer. "Emma's embroidery work deserves to be highlighted." I smiled, remembering a time not so long ago when Vanessa would have been the one in front of the camera, wearing borrowed clothes, playing a role. Now she was behind the scenes, creating something authentic, something that would last. She caught my eye and winked before turning back to the shoot. We had developed a shorthand over these months of collaboration, an unspoken understanding that made our partnership work despite our different approaches. My phone buzzed with a message from James Chen, our buyer at Bergdorf's. The sustainable luxury collection is outperforming projections by 23%. When can we meet to discuss expanding the line? I showed the message to Vanessa during a break in the shoot. She grinned, pulling me into a quick hug. "Told you sustainability was the future," she said. "People don't just want beautiful things anymore. They want things with meaning, with purpose. People like you." I teased, remembering the Vanessa who had once valued labels over substance. She laughed, not offended. "Especially people like me. The reformed fast fashion addicts who finally understand the true cost of disposable trends." Her transformation had been as remarkable as our business growth. The influencer who once chased every fleeting trend now spoke passionately about slow fashion, about ethical production, about the stories behind the clothes we wear. And her followers had responded, embracing our message of conscious luxury with unexpected enthusiasm. "We should celebrate," I said, nodding toward the message from Bergdorf's. "Dinner tonight? Just the 2 of us?" "Can't," she grimaced apologetically. "I have that panel discussion on sustainable fashion at Fit. But tomorrow? We could do brunch at that place in the West Village you love. The one with the avocado toast that costs more than some people's hourly wage." "That's the one," she nodded. My treat. A small price to pay for having the most talented designer in New York as my business partner. I rolled my eyes at the flattery but felt the familiar warmth of pride. Our mutual appreciation had become a cornerstone of our relationship, genuine recognition of each other's strengths, a far cry from the competitive dynamic that had defined our earlier years. "Ms. Mitchell?" Our assistant, Danny, approached with a tablet in hand. There's a call you might want to take. It's Sophia Loren from Paris Fashion Week. Vanessa and I exchanged glances, both thinking the same thing. Paris Fashion Week had been our shared dream since childhood, a distant goal we'd discussed but never seriously pursued, believing it was years away from our reach. Put her through to my office, I said, trying to keep my voice casual. Vanessa followed me, closing the door behind us as I took the call on speakerphone. Ms. Mitchell, came the accented voice. I am calling on behalf of the selection committee for Paris Fashion Week. We have been following your work with interest since your Vogue feature last year. I gripped the edge of my desk, Vanessa's hand finding my shoulder in silent support. Your approach to sustainable luxury aligns with our initiative to highlight innovative, environmentally conscious design. We would like to invite Mitchell and Mitchell to present a collection at the upcoming spring shows. The words hung in the air, almost too monumental to absorb. Paris Fashion Week. The pinnacle of the fashion world. The dream that had seemed impossible just months ago. We would be honored, I managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. After the call ended, Vanessa and I stood in silence for a long moment, the magnitude of the opportunity settling over us. Paris, she whispered finally. Can you believe it? I shook my head, thinking of the journey that had brought us here. From borrowed clothes to borrowed lives to something entirely our own. From resentment to partnership. From competition to collaboration. We have 4 months to create the most extraordinary collection of our lives, I said, already mentally sketching designs, considering fabrics, envisioning the story we would tell on one of fashion's most prestigious stages. 4 months, Vanessa echoed, her expression shifting from excitement to determination. We'll need to push everything else back, focus entirely on Paris. Can you handle that with your schedule? The partnerships you've committed to, the content calendar you've planned? She didn't hesitate. This comes first. Everything else can wait. The weeks that followed were the most intense of our professional lives. We expanded our team, bringing on additional seamstresses and a technical designer to help execute the increasingly complex pieces I was creating. Vanessa postponed brand partnerships and scaled back her personal content to focus on documenting our journey to Paris, creating a narrative that resonated deeply with her followers. Our mother visited the studio regularly, bringing homemade meals when we worked late and offering an extra pair of hands when deadlines loomed. She had become our biggest champion, proudly sharing our progress with anyone who would listen. I always knew my girls would do something extraordinary, she told a fashion blogger who came to interview us. But I never imagined they would change an industry together. The collection took shape around a concept we called borrowed beauty, pieces created entirely from reclaimed materials, each with a story of transformation and renewal. A gown made from vintage wedding dresses, their beadwork reconfigured into constellations across the bodice. A suit crafted from men's tuxedos from the 1950s, deconstructed and reimagined for the modern woman. A series of evening wear constructed from factory remnants that would otherwise have been discarded. Every piece spoke to our journey, taking what had been forgotten or undervalued and revealing its inherent worth and beauty. 3 weeks before we were scheduled to leave for Paris, disaster struck. Pipe burst in the unit above us, the building manager explained, surveying the damage with grim resignation. Insurance will cover it, but the repairs will take at least 2 weeks. I called Vanessa, trying to keep the panic from my voice. As I explained the situation. Don't move anything, she said immediately. I'm on my way. And I'm bringing reinforcements. Within an hour, the studio was filled with people, fashion students Vanessa had recruited from FIT, fellow designers I had worked with over the years, even James Chen from Bergdorf's with 2 of his visual merchandising team. They carefully moved our sodden materials, salvaged what could be saved, documented the damage for insurance purposes. By midday, we faced the reality of our situation. We had lost nearly a third of our materials. The specialized sewing equipment would need to be repaired or replaced. And we had nowhere to continue our work during the repairs. We could try to postpone, Vanessa suggested quietly as we sat in a nearby cafe, attempting to regroup. Explain the situation to the committee, ask for a slot next season instead. I shook my head, thinking of the momentum we would lose, the message it would send about our resilience as a brand. Paris Fashion Week waits for no one. If we postpone, there's no guarantee we'd get another invitation. Then what do? We have no studio, limited materials, and less than a month to finish a collection that isn't even close to ready. I took a deep breath, an idea forming, one that required swallowing my pride but might just save our Paris debut. We go home, I said finally. Back to Mom's house in Connecticut. She has that sunroom that's practically unused. We move what we've salvaged there, set up a temporary studio, and finish the collection together. Just like when we were kids. Vanessa stared at me for a moment, then laughed, a genuine laugh of surprise and recognition. Remember when we used to put on fashion shows in the backyard? You designed these elaborate outfits from old curtains and sheets, and I'd model them for an audience of stuffed animals. And Mom would take photos on that ancient Polaroid camera. I smiled, the memory unexpectedly vivid. She still has those photos in an album somewhere. Full circle, Vanessa nodded, her expression softening. Back to where it all began. Our mother was thrilled with the arrangement, quickly helping us transform her sunroom into a functional studio space. The large windows flooded the room with natural light, the garden beyond providing unexpected inspiration for new design elements. We worked around the clock, adapting our designs to the materials we had salvaged, sourcing new fabrics from local suppliers, simplifying where necessary without compromising our vision. Vanessa modeled pieces as I fitted them, offering insights from her years of experience in front of the camera. The drape needs to move more freely here, she would suggest, indicating the hip of a silk jumpsuit. Or, this neckline photographs beautifully from this angle. Our mother brought us meals, made coffee, occasionally sat quietly watching us work with a contentment that spoke of dreams fulfilled, not the ones she had for us, but the ones we had found for ourselves. 2 weeks before Paris, a prominent fashion critic requested a preview of the collection for a feature in the New York Times. We hesitated, protective of our vision, afraid of showing something unfinished. Let's do it, Vanessa said finally. Not a full preview, but enough to create anticipation. Besides, if there are issues with the collection, better to know now than on the runway in Paris. The critic arrived at our makeshift studio, eyebrows raised at the unexpected setting but quickly impressed by what we showed her, 3 completed looks that represented the core of our collection. Most new designers aim for flash, for immediate impact, she noted, examining the intricate beadwork on a reclaimed silk blazer. But this has substance. It asks the viewer to look closer, to consider the story behind each piece. Her feature, published the following week, described Mitchell & Mitchell as fashion's most promising new voice, and our upcoming Paris debut as the must-see show of the season. Overnight, our waiting list doubled. Retailers who had been hesitant to commit now reached out with interest. Fashion editors requested front-row seats at our show. We're not even in Paris yet, and we've already succeeded, Vanessa marveled. Reading the article for the 3rd time. We haven't succeeded until those clothes walk the runway, I reminded her, always the pragmatist to her optimist. Always raising the bar, she teased, but her smile was warm. That's why we work, you. No. You push me to be better, to dig deeper. And I remind you to celebrate the victories along the way. The night before we left for Paris, our mother hosted a small dinner party, just the 3 of us, Zoe, and a few close friends who had supported us from the beginning. The collection, carefully packed in specialized garment bags, waited in the next room, ready for its journey across the Atlantic. I want to make a toast, our mother said, raising her glass. To my daughters, who turned borrowing into building. Who created something extraordinary not by taking from each other, but by giving to each other. Vanessa and I exchanged glances, remembering how far we had come from that first discovery of borrowed clothes, that first act of retaliation. To Mitchell & Mitchell, Zoe added. The best thing to come out of sisterly theft since the Kardashians borrowed each other's boyfriends. Everyone laughed, the tension of the upcoming show momentarily lifted by friendship and shared history. Later that night, unable to sleep, I found Vanessa in the sunroom, sitting among the remnants of our temporary studio, scrolling through photos on her phone. Nervous? I asked, sitting beside her. Terrified, she admitted with a small smile. But the good kind of terrified. The kind that means you're doing something that matters. She showed me her phone screen, photos from the past year. The 2 of us in my tiny Brooklyn apartment planning our first collection. The opening of our Soho boutique. The day our designs first appeared in Bergdorf's windows. And older photos too, childhood snapshots of 2 sisters with fashion dreams. Long before complications and resentments and borrowed lives. I've been thinking about what Mom said, she continued, setting her phone down. About borrowing and building. I borrowed your clothes because I wanted a piece of your talent, your authenticity. You borrowed my access because you wanted recognition for that talent. But what we've built together is so much more than either of those things. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. We've built a new way of seeing each other. A new way of being sisters. And a pretty amazing fashion brand, she added with a grin. That too, I laughed. Though if our Paris collection flops, we might be back to borrowing each other's things out of necessity rather than jealousy. It won't flop, she said with certainty. It can't. It's too honest. Paris welcomed us with gray skies and persistent rain, but nothing could dampen our spirits as we arrived at the venue the day before our show. The space, a renovated 19th century factory with soaring ceilings and massive windows, was being transformed according to our specifications. Reclaimed wood platforms for the runway. Vintage chandeliers repurposed as lighting installations. A backdrop of hundreds of fabric scraps woven together to create a tapestry of color and texture. Our models, diverse in age, size, and ethnicity, arrived for final fittings, each selected not just for their look but for their commitment to ethical fashion. The hair and makeup team worked to create a natural aesthetic that enhanced rather than masked individual beauty. Every detail reflected our brand ethos of authenticity and conscious luxury. On the morning of the show, I woke early, mind racing, with last-minute concerns. What if the critics dismissed our work as derivative? What if the sustainable aspect overshadowed the design? What if, after everything, we simply weren't ready for a stage this prominent? I found Vanessa already awake. In our shared hotel suite, calmly reviewing the run of show, making notes about the music timing, the lighting cues. How are you so calm? I asked, pouring a much-needed coffee from the room service tray. She looked up with a smile that didn't quite mask her own nervousness. I'm not. I'm just better at faking it than you are. Years of practice. Any last-minute disasters I should know about? Nothing we can't handle, she assured me. The hem on look 12 needed reinforcement, but the team is on it. And 2 of the editors from our priority list had to cancel, but they're sending their associates instead. I nodded, grateful for her meticulous attention to these details, her ability to manage the business aspects while I focused on the creative execution. I've been thinking, she said, setting aside her notes. After the show, regardless of how it's received, we should take a few days off. Go somewhere with no fashion, no social media, no business meetings. Just be sisters for a while. Where did you have in mind? Remember that summer we spent in Provence with Mom after Dad left? That little village with the lavender fields. And the bakery that made those almond pastries you loved? I smiled at the memory, one of the few from that difficult period that wasn't tinged with sadness. Saint Remy de Provence. I'd like that. Then it's settled. First, we conquer Paris Fashion Week. Then, we eat pastries in Provence. The hours before the show passed in a blur of activity. Last-minute adjustments to garments. Final briefings with models. Interviews with select press. Through it all, Vanessa and I moved in perfect synchronicity, each anticipating the other's needs, each filling gaps the other missed. As the venue filled with fashion's elite, I stood backstage, watching through a monitor as attendees found their seats. Front row, just as requested, sat Margot from Vogue, James Chen from Bergdorf's, and to my surprise, our mother, looking elegant but slightly overwhelmed by the grandiosity of it all. 5 minutes, the stage manager announced. Vanessa appeared at my side, squeezing my hand. Whatever happens out there, I'm proud of us, she said quietly. Proud of what we've created together. I nodded, unable to speak through the emotion. Tightening my throat. The lights dimmed. The music began, a haunting violin piece that built slowly in intensity. And our first model stepped onto the runway, wearing a jacket crafted from vintage kimono silk, restructured and reimagined for a new century, a new purpose. The audience was silent at first, then murmurs of appreciation began to ripple through the space. By the time our finale look appeared, a gown created entirely from discarded wedding dresses, their collective histories woven into something new and breathtaking, the response was unmistakable. This was not polite appreciation. This was recognition. Of something authentic, something meaningful. When Vanessa and I took our brief bow at the end of the show, the applause was thunderous. In the front row, our mother stood, tears streaming down her face, pride radiating from her like light. Backstage was chaos, congratulations, champagne, press requests, buyers eager to place orders. Through it all, Vanessa stayed close to my sighed, both of us slightly dazed by the reception, both aware that something fundamental had shifted in our professional trajectory. Later that night, after the post-show dinner, after the interviews and the celebrations, Vanessa and I sat on the balcony of our hotel room, sharing the last bottle of champagne, watching the lights of Paris shimmer below us. "We did it," she said softly. "We really did it." I nodded, thinking not just of the show's success but of everything that had led us here, the hurt, the healing, the discovery that what we had each envied in the other was only a fraction of what we could create together. "I used to think success meant having what you had," I admitted. "The followers, the invitations, the glamour. But that wasn't it at all. And I thought success meant having your talent, your vision, your authenticity," she countered. "But that wasn't it either. So what is it, then? Success?" She considered for a moment, twirling her champagne glass thoughtfully. "Maybe it's finding the courage to borrow what you need until you discover what you already have." I smiled, recognizing the truth in her words. Mitchell & Mitchell. Fashion's most philosophical new brand. "Don't tell the critics," she laughed. "They'll expect us to put quotes from Nietzsche on t-shirts next season." We fell into comfortable silence, the distant sounds of Paris creating a gentle backdrop to our thoughts. "You know," I said finally, "for all the clothes you borrowed from me, and all the access I borrowed from you, the most valuable thing we've shared is perspective. Seeing ourselves through each other's eyes." "And what do you see?" she asked softly. "I see a sister who is so much more than her Instagram feed. Who has genuine business acumen, remarkable people skills, and the courage to reinvent herself. Who turned borrowed glamour into authentic influence." She smiled, eyes bright with emotion. "And I see a sister who is more than her designs. Who has perseverance, integrity, and a vision that transforms the overlooked into the extraordinary. Who borrowed access and earned her place at the table." Our glasses clinked in a silent toast, to borrowed clothes and borrowed lives, to the unexpected journey that had brought us here, and to the road ahead, no longer walking in each other's shadow but side by side in the light. The next morning, the reviews began to appear. "Mitchell & Mitchell redefines luxury at Paris debut." Read the headline in Vogue. "Sustainable fashion finds its voice in Mitchell & Mitchell collection," declared the New York Times. "The future of fashion has arrived," proclaimed WWD. Orders flooded in from retailers around the world. Celebrities requested pieces for upcoming red carpet events. Offers of collaboration came from established brands seeking to align themselves with our sustainable ethos. But the most meaningful response came in a simple text from Zoe, who had watched the live stream from New York. "They're not talking about Emma Mitchell or Vanessa Mitchell anymore. They're talking about Mitchell & Mitchell. You're no longer defined by what you borrowed from each other, but by what you've built together." As promised, after the whirlwind of post-show appointments, Vanessa and I escaped to Saint-Rémy-de-Provence. We rented a small stone cottage surrounded by lavender fields, its terrace overlooking rolling hills that seemed unchanged since our childhood visit. On our second morning there, I found Vanessa at the local market, bargaining in rusty French for fresh peaches and bread. "For a famous fashion designer, you drive a hard bargain," I teased as she triumphantly paid several euros less than the asking price. "Some habits die hard," she shrugged. "Besides, I'm saving money for what really matters." "And what's that?" She pointed to a small boutique across the square. In the window hung a simple linen dress, beautifully crafted but without designer labels or luxury pricing. "Local designer," she explained. "Makes everything herself from regional materials." I thought we might go in, introduce ourselves. Not as Mitchell & Mitchell from Paris Fashion Week, but just as two sisters who appreciate beautiful, thoughtful design. I smiled, recognizing the gesture for what it was, a reminder that fashion existed beyond the glittering world we had entered. That creation and craft happened in quiet corners as well as on international stages. Inside the shop, we met Lucienne, a woman in her 60s who had been designing and sewing for over 40 years, building a loyal clientele without ever seeking broader recognition. "Fashion is not about who sees it," she told us as she showed us her workroom, a sun-filled space not unlike our temporary studio in Connecticut. "It is about who feels it. How the wearer stands taller, moves differently, becomes more herself in something made with care." Her words stayed with me as we walked back to our cottage that afternoon, the scent of lavender filling the air, the weight of Fashion Week accolades and pressures temporarily lifted from our shoulders. "We should remember this," I said as we Sat on our terrace that evening, watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of gold and amber. When we're back in New York, when the business grows, when things get complicated again, we should remember Lucienne and her quiet dedication to craft for its own sake. Vanessa nodded, understanding perfectly. Mitchell and Mitchell started. Because I borrowed your clothes and you borrowed my life. But what we've created isn't about borrowing anymore. It's about building something authentic, something that matters, not just to the fashion world, but to us. I reached for her hand, grateful for this moment of clarity, for the sister who had once been my rival and was now my partner, for the journey that had transformed us both. From borrowed to built, I said softly. That's our story. And it's just beginning, she added, her eyes reflecting the last light of day, full of possibilities yet to be realized, dreams yet to be shared. 3 years after our Paris debut, Mitchell & Mitchell had evolved from an emerging brand to a respected name in sustainable luxury fashion. Our flagship store in Soho had been joined by boutiques in London and Tokyo. Our designs appeared regularly in major fashion publications and on conscious celebrities who valued both style and substance. We had been invited back to Paris Fashion Week each season, our runway shows becoming known for their innovative approach to reclaimed materials and ethical production. Success had changed us, but not in the ways I had feared. Vanessa had transformed from an influencer focused on appearances to a powerful advocate for sustainability in fashion, using her platform to educate rather than simply promote. I had grown from a designer who worked in isolation to a creative director who collaborated with artisans around the world, learning traditional techniques and incorporating them into contemporary designs. Our relationship as sisters had deepened as well, the old resentments and competitions giving way to genuine appreciation and support. We still disagreed, still challenged each other, but now those tensions produced creative friction rather than personal hurt. On a crisp October morning, I arrived at our headquarters, a renovated textile factory in Brooklyn that housed our design studio, business offices, and a small manufacturing space where we created our most specialized pieces. The building hummed with activity, pattern makers cutting fabric, seamstresses at industrial machines, interns cataloging vintage materials for future collections. Danny, now our operations director, met me at the entrance with a tablet in hand and a concerned expression. The Osaka shipment is delayed again, she reported, walking beside me as I headed toward my office. Environmental protesters have blocked the port. They're targeting luxury brands for not doing enough to reduce carbon footprints. I paused, processing this information. Are we specifically named in the protest? No, she shook her head. That's the irony. We're one of the few brands using low-impact shipping methods and carbon offsets. They just haven't done their research. Reach out to their organizers, I decided. Invite them here. Show them our production methods, our material sourcing, our shipping protocols. Maybe we can turn adversaries into allies. Danny nodded, making notes. Vanessa said you'd say that. She's already drafting an open letter to post today, highlighting our environmental commitments and expressing solidarity with their concerns, if not their methods. I smiled, not surprised that my sister had anticipated my response. We had developed an almost uncanny ability to predict each other's thoughts on business matters, often arriving at the same solution from different starting points. Where is Vanessa this morning? I asked, realizing I hadn't seen her yet. Meeting with the Parsons students. The mentorship program, remember? Of course. The initiative had been Vanessa's idea, inviting fashion students to work alongside us, learning sustainable design practices firsthand. It had started small, just 2 students 1 day a week, but had grown into a structured program with a waiting list of applicants and academic credit. I continued to my office, passing the wall where we displayed press coverage of Mitchell & Mitchell. The most recent edition was a New York Times profile headlined, "The Sisters Who Revolutionized Fashion's Approach to Sustainability." The article praised not just our designs but our business practices, fair wages for all workers, transparent sourcing, minimal waste production. My desk was covered with fabric samples for our upcoming collection, along with sketches and mood boards. This season we were exploring the concept of inherited beauty, creating pieces inspired by traditional craftsmanship from around the world, collaborating with artisans whose skills had been passed down through generations. I was deep in work when Vanessa arrived, bringing the energy that always seemed to surround her. Despite her packed schedule, she never appeared rushed or stressed, maintaining a calm confidence that had become her trademark. "The students are incredible," she announced, dropping into the chair across from my desk. "Two of them have developed a process for creating biodegradable sequins from algae. Actual functioning sequins that decompose naturally after a few years. We need to hire them immediately." I looked up from my sketches, intrigued. Biodegradable embellishments have been on our wish list forever. "Are they interested in working with us?" "They'd give up their firstborn children for the opportunity," she laughed. "But I suggested we start with paid internships and see where it goes. I've already asked legal to draft the contracts." "Perfect." I pushed a sketch across the desk, a gown with intricate beadwork inspired by traditional Maasai craftsmanship. "What do you think of this for the finale?" She studied it thoughtfully. "The silhouette is stunning, but are we partnering directly with Maasai artisans? Otherwise it feels like appropriation rather than appreciation." 3 years ago, Vanessa wouldn't have recognized that distinction. Her growth in understanding the ethical dimensions of fashion continued to impress me. "I've been in contact with a women's cooperative in Kenya," I explained. "They're interested in a collaboration where they create the beadwork using traditional methods and receive proper credit and compensation. We'd highlight their craft and story in all marketing materials." "That's what sets us apart," she nodded approvingly. "Not just taking inspiration, but creating true partnerships." Our conversation was interrupted by Danny appearing in the doorway, her expression a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "Sophia Loren is here," she announced. "From Paris Fashion Week. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." Vanessa and I exchanged glances. Sophia was now the director of the selection committee for Paris Fashion Week, one of the most powerful figures in the industry. Her unexpected appearance could mean anything from an exciting opportunity to a serious problem. "Send her in," I said, quickly clearing space on my desk while Vanessa straightened her already impeccable outfit. Sophia entered with the confident stride of someone accustomed to commanding attention. Though in her 60s, she remained the epitome of French elegance, slim, poised, dressed in deceptively simple black that I recognized as Dior. "The Mitchell sisters," she greeted us with air kisses. "Always working, I see. No rest for the visionaries." "Sophia," Vanessa smiled warmly. "What a lovely surprise. What brings you to New York?" "To the point, as always," Sophia approved, taking the seat Vanessa offered. "I am here with a proposition. One that recognizes what you have accomplished and challenges you to go further." She placed a slim leather portfolio on my desk. "Paris Fashion Week is creating a new initiative, a spotlight on innovation in sustainable luxury. We want Mitchell & Mitchell to headline this program at the upcoming fall shows." I opened the portfolio, scanning the details as Sophia continued. "This would be more than a runway show. We envision an installation, a masterclass for industry professionals, and a public forum. A full week of events highlighting your approach to fashion as both beautiful and responsible." Vanessa leaned forward, instantly grasping the scope of the opportunity. "You're talking about using our brand as a case study for the industry." "Precisely," Sophia nodded. "Many luxury brands claim to be moving toward sustainability, but they do so incrementally, cautiously. You began with sustainability as your foundation and built beauty upon it. That is the model the industry needs to see." I continued reading the proposal, noting the timeline, the resources being offered, the expectations. "This is incredibly flattering," I said carefully, "but also a massive undertaking. We'd need to create not just a collection but an educational experience." "Which is why I am giving you 6 months," Sophia replied. "Longer than our usual timeline. This must be done properly or not at all." Vanessa caught my eye, and I could see she was already visualizing the possibilities, the platforms this would create for our message as well as our designs. "We'll need to discuss the details," I said, not wanting to commit without proper consideration, but I think I can speak for both of us in saying we're very interested. "Excellent," Sophia stood, as brisk in departure as in arrival. "Review the materials. We will speak next week." After she left, Vanessa and I sat in stunned silence for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of what had just been proposed. "They want us to be the face of sustainable luxury," Vanessa said finally. "Not just for one season, but as the example for the entire industry. It's an enormous responsibility," I nodded. "And opportunity." Remember when you borrowed my invitation to Atelier 3 years ago? She asked, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. When you pretended to be someone you weren't yet, just to get your foot in the door? Hard to forget, I laughed. I was terrified the entire time. And now Paris Fashion Week is coming to us, asking us to show the way forward. She shook her head in wonder. We've come so far from borrowed clothes and borrowed lives. We have, I agreed, thinking of all the steps that had brought us here, the hurt, the healing, the hard work, the gradual building of something authentic and meaningful. The rest of the day passed in a blur of regular business, design reviews, production meetings, financial updates. But beneath it all ran an electric current of excitement about Sophia's proposal. This was more than recognition, it was influence. The chance to shape how an entire industry approached its relationship with the planet and its people. That evening, Vanessa and I had dinner with our mother at her apartment, a ritual we maintained despite our increasingly demanding schedules. She had moved to New York after our Paris debut, wanting to be closer to us and to the business she had watched grow from a makeshift studio in her sunroom to an international brand. As we helped her prepare the meal, a simple pasta dish with vegetables from her small container garden, we told her about Sophia's visit. My girls, she said, her eyes bright with pride. Changing the world one beautiful dress at a time. We're not changing the world, Mom, I demurred, always uncomfortable with overstatement. Aren't you? She challenged gently. You're showing an industry built on excess and exclusivity that there's another way forward. That beauty doesn't have to come at the expense of ethics. That seems like changing the world to me. Vanessa squeezed my shoulder, a silent agreement with our mother's assessment. We're trying, at least. And this opportunity with Paris Fashion Week could amplify our message significantly. Over dinner, we discussed the practical aspects of Sophia's proposal, the additional staff we might need, the impact on our regular production schedule, the financial considerations. Our mother listened attentively, occasionally offering insights from her years of business experience before retirement. The question isn't whether you can do this, she said as we cleared the dishes. Of course you can. The question is what story you want to tell with this platform. What is the message that only Mitchell & Mitchell can deliver? Her question stayed with me as Vanessa and I walked back to our respective apartments later that night. What was our unique message? We had built our brand on sustainable luxury, yes, but that concept was increasingly adopted, if not always authentically practiced, throughout the industry. This, she said simply, is exactly why we came to Mitchell & Mitchell. You understand that true sustainability requires not just different materials, but a different relationship with material itself. Over the following months, our vision for Full Circle took shape. We assembled a team of collaborators from around the world, a master weaver from Peru whose family had been creating textiles for generations, a Japanese artisan skilled in kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold, a group of women in India who specialized in upcycling sari fabric into new garments. Our studio became a laboratory of transformation. We developed a process for breaking down unsold luxury garments to their component fibers and reweaving them into new textiles. We experimented with natural dyes created from food waste. We worked with the students from Parsons to incorporate their biodegradable sequins into evening wear that would eventually return to the earth. Throughout the process, we documented everything, the successes, the failures, the unexpected discoveries. Vanessa created a digital platform where people could follow our journey, asking questions and offering suggestions that sometimes led to breakthrough moments. The transparency was uncomfortable at times. Fashion had traditionally operated behind closed doors, presenting only the perfect final product rather than the messy process of creation. But the response was overwhelming. Other designers began sharing their own processes. Students created study groups around our live streams. Even traditional luxury houses started conversations about opening their studios to greater scrutiny. For months into the project, I arrived at the studio one morning to find Vanessa already there, surrounded by mood boards for the runway presentation. I've been thinking, she said without preamble. The runway show shouldn't just feature professional models. We should include the artisans who helped create the collection, the students who contributed innovations, even some of our longtime customers who embody our ethos in how they approach their wardrobes. I considered the idea, mentally reviewing the logistics, the potential challenges, the powerful statement it would make. It's risky, I acknowledged. Fashion Week audiences expect a certain polished aesthetic. This would be messier, more human. Exactly, she nodded. If we're really talking about transformation, about new relationships with fashion, shouldn't the presentation itself reflect that? She was right, and I knew it. Just as we had moved beyond the traditional approach to materials and production, we needed to rethink the presentation itself. Let's do it, I decided. But let's make sure everyone understands what they're signing up for. Paris Fashion Week is high pressure, high visibility. I want them to feel empowered, not exploited. The preparations intensified as the event approached. Beyond creating the collection itself, we were developing the educational components. Coordinating with dozens of participants, planning the installation that would showcase our process alongside the finished pieces. A month before we were scheduled to leave for Paris, we held a dress rehearsal in our Brooklyn space, bringing together all the elements of our presentation for the first time. The collection itself exceeded even my expectations, 27 pieces that told a cohesive story of transformation and renewal, each beautiful in its own right but more powerful as part of the whole. The diverse group of people who would walk in the show brought the clothes to life in ways I hadn't anticipated. Maria, the master weaver from Peru, carried herself with quiet dignity in a coat that incorporated her traditional patterns into a contemporary silhouette. Arjun, the engineering student who had helped develop our zero-waste cutting technique, moved with youthful energy in a suit made entirely from reclaimed formal wear. Helen, a 68-year-old architect who had been one of our first customers, looked elegant and commanding in an evening dress dyed with botanical pigments. As they practiced walking the makeshift runway, I stood beside Vanessa, both of us watching in silence, absorbing the power of what we had created together. It's not just about the clothes, she said quietly. It's about the connections. Between materials and meaning, between tradition and innovation, between the people who make fashion and the people who wear it. I nodded, thinking of how far we had come from that moment of discovery, me finding my clothes on Vanessa's Instagram, her finding her invitation in my email. How an act of borrowing had led to building, how resentment had transformed into respect, how competition had evolved into collaboration. Full circle, I said softly. The Paris presentation exceeded all expectations. The runway show, with its diverse participants, its storytelling approach, its emphasis on process as much as product, received a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. The installation documenting our journey attracted thousands of visitors, from industry professionals to fashion students to curious tourists. The masterclasses were oversubscribed, with people willing to stand at the back of the room just to hear our team share their knowledge. But the most meaningful moment came during the public forum on the final day of the week. We had organized a discussion on the future of sustainable luxury, inviting other designers, environmental experts, and ethical fashion advocates to join us on stage. During the question period, a young woman in the audience stood and introduced herself as a design student from London. Before I ask my question, she said, I want to thank you both. 3 years ago, I was ready to leave fashion altogether. I loved design, but I couldn't reconcile it with my concerns about the industry's impact on the planet and its people. Then I saw your Vogue feature, sisters approaching fashion from different perspectives but finding common ground in sustainability. It showed me there was another way forward. Vanessa and I exchanged glances, moved by her words, by the realization that our personal journey had resonated beyond ourselves. My question is, the student continued, what would you say to other designers who feel torn between creativity and conscience? Who want to make beautiful things but not at the expense of ethics? Vanessa leaned toward her microphone. I'd say that's a false dichotomy. The most creative solutions often emerge from constraints. When you commit to ethical practices, to sustainability, you don't limit your creativity, you channel it in new directions. You find beauty in unexpected places. And I would add, I continued, that fashion has always been about transformation. Transforming fiber into fabric, fabric into garments, garments into expression. Sustainable fashion simply extends that transformation to include our relationship with resources, with labor, with consumption itself. The student nodded, visibly emotional. Thank you. You've helped transform not just materials, but an entire generation's approach to fashion. As the forum concluded and the audience dispersed, Vanessa and I remained seated on stage for a moment, absorbing the impact of the week, the journey that had brought us here. Do you ever think about that day? She asked quietly. When you Found your clothes on my Instagram? I smiled, remembering the hurt, the anger, the sense of betrayal. Sometimes. But mostly I think about what came after. How borrowing without permission became building with purpose. From borrowing to building, she nodded. That should be the title of our book. Book? I raised an eyebrow. The one we're going to write about our journey, she explained. As if it were obvious. About how sibling rivalry became creative partnership. About how fashion can be both beautiful and ethical. About transformation, of clothes, of an industry, of ourselves. I laughed, not surprised that Vanessa was. Already thinking of the next chapter when we had barely completed this one. It was what made us work so well together, her vision always stretching forward while my focus remained on the present moment, the tangible creation. Maybe someday, I conceded. When we've learned even more, transformed even further. She smiled, standing and offering me her hand. Deal? But for now, let's celebrate what we've accomplished. Not just a successful presentation, but a new conversation about what fashion can be. As we walked off stage together, I thought about the young design student, about all the people who had engaged with our message throughout the week, about the ripple effects that would continue long after we returned to New York. We had started with borrowed clothes and borrowed access, with resentment and retaliation. But we had built something neither of us could have created alone, a brand, yes, but more importantly, a new vision of what was possible when creativity and conscience worked in harmony. The transformation wasn't complete, for us or for the industry we hoped to influence. But transformation, I had learned, was never finished. It was a continuous process, a circle always turning, finding new ways to create beauty from what already exists, to build value from what has been overlooked, to see possibility where others see limitation. From borrowed to built to becoming. That was our story. And it was still being written, stitch by stitch, day by day, together. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.